let us do a second one. It is the second edition of the Gigamon Insight podcast. My name is Danny Akatsuki. I am the Senior Technical Account Manager with Gigamon Threat Insight. And joining me, one of my favorite people in this entire company, gave the best hug when I actually came on board, Mr. Will Peteroy, our Chief Technology Officer for Security. What's up, man?
Hey, Danny, how's it going?
Good. Timely that we're doing these podcasts now. I mentioned in the first episode that we had discussed this towards the end of December, Steven and I, about doing these, and now we're all virtual. So I figure it's a good a time as any to start sharing some knowledge. Particularly interesting for this one, entitled Business in a Bag, because we wanted to do one about working from home, because that's what like all of us are doing now pretty much. And if you're not, or if you're on hold, or if you actually have to, thankfully, like, our job is remote. Like, that's awesome. We're not on the front lines or anything, but not exactly cut and dry, right? It's kind of an acquired skill set to work remotely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things. So I was fortunate. I got to be one of the co-founders of Iceberg, which was acquired by Gigamon in 2018. And I remember when we were sitting down at Iceberg thinking about remote work, and honestly, our first set of remote work was a complete train wreck, in that really nobody was happy. And so we had the opportunity a couple of years after that to hire some really, really talented security researchers that were based. So main office was up in Seattle, and the security researchers were actually based down in California. And we decided to give it another go. And in that, we had a whole set of lessons learned from the first time when we messed it up. And so, yeah, I think that for us, and I mean, Danny, you got to experience and have gotten to experience that kind of like, we have remote weeks. We do spend time to, like, just because everybody's remote, we do, when we're not in a pandemic, try to spend a lot more time together face to face with folks, and kind of, have a schedule. And yeah, anyway, I think that the second edition of working remote at Iceberg and now at Gigamon has been a really big success in my mind. We've had really good retention. People have been really happy. I think, in a lot of ways, I look at the remote team as an extended family, and that's been really cool. I think that, the challenge of these days is, it's no longer just folks that used to work remote. I used to travel like 75-80%, so it's kind of like working remote, only you're literally working out of a bag. Like, I have a GoRuck that is pretty much work for me. Everything I need for work fits in there, and I take it with me all over the place. But I think the big challenge is, like, now that everybody's working remote, what does that mean? And then what kind of lessons learned do we have from, being remote workers, managing remote workers? So anyway, lots of good stuff to talk about here.
Yeah. So you had mentioned the first time that you had done it. What were some of those lessons learned? Like what do you think and of course I completely glossed over in the beginning. I'm like, Will is Chief CTO for Security, not mentioning that Iceberg was his baby. Like, he's the one that brought this to us. Like, I remember hearing about Iceberg years ago and people trying to get me to come there. And I was like, oh no, I don't know about it. And I regret every single day that I did not come. So I completely glossed over that. So my apologies for that. But as somebody in the executive suite, somebody making those big business decisions, what did you see that was maybe a weak point? And this is going to be, a good lesson maybe for those people that are watching that are in charge of those decisions and still don't have it down.
Yeah, so I think that really it comes down to, like, what does success look like? And really, success looked like three things for me when we were doing remote work the first time. And by, like, what success looked like, this is exactly what it didn't look like, because I told you it was a travesty the first time that we did it. The first thing is, are people happy, right? So I know that sounds like a kind of like touchy-feely first thing for, especially having come out of a startup where everything's a little bit rough and tumble and there's sharp edges on everything around you. But really, I think that if people aren't happy, and if their work situation is contributing to that in a meaningful way, like, you got to really look at that as a leader. The second piece for me is really communications, right? Like, and this kind of comes up in a lot of different ways as a leader, is like, hey, when I ask, like, are timelines getting met? Are people understanding what they need to do? Are people getting engaged? One of the biggest things that I see that people, routinely have challenges with, even in in-person meetings, but is amplified in a remote setting, in my mind, is one person coming in, like a senior leader, and just coming in and talking the entire time. Um, I generally like, if you really value the opinion of the people that you're working with, you probably shouldn't be the one talking 80 to 90% of the meeting. Stuff like that. Like, are your remote workers talking and contributing to meetings? Is it one of those where the meeting is really all the people in the room and you're not even hearing an opinion from the folks on the other side of the line? And we just honestly, we were guilty. I was guilty of that as CEO. Just, you know, it's difficult as an adjustment period to start to have to listen to everybody around you. And it's tough. Like, Danny, you work remote all the time, and that's I think one of the big things to get right. The third thing that really is measurable is retention, which kind of goes back to like employee happiness. But I would say, like, are the folks that are working remote, are they looking to leave in less than 2 years? Which I feel like in our industry is pretty much like, I want everybody to be here at least 2 years. Ideally, like, I'm planning for a 4 to 5 year hiring cycle, ideally. But if I don't have somebody in seat for 2 years, for example, things like recruiting fees and a bunch of other stuff really don't make business sense. So kind of like big three, like, are people happy? Are people communicating well? And is retention good? Those are the things I think that really define success around remote work. And I would argue that even though we're all in a pandemic, that those three things are still very important. Maybe the first two more than the third. I don't hear a lot of big job moves happening right now, but I don't think that'll be the status quo. I think as people are working more remote, those people that don't want to go back into the office, like, I think every company is going to be challenged here in the next 6 months to figure out what remote work looks like for them.
Yeah, and I remember it was tough for me, going back, 8 years now. My first remote job, when I was with Mandiant, of getting, like, finding my swing, because I'd been in offices, forever, going from a conversation about what executives have to go through to, like, what do the rank and file do, or just what if, somebody that is suddenly thrust into this. And I remember being remote, and the first week I made my wife go out with me to the mall every single night just to mall walk, because I felt like I was just missing people. And then fast forward 8 years later, the pendulum has almost swung completely wrong the other way, and to the point where I'm almost a shut in. And I have to remember, Danny, leave the house. Danny, work on your social graces. Uh, Danny, please get dressed. For the love of God, please get dressed. So it really is an acquired skill people would think, like, oh, I can work from home now and I can focus on this and do this. It's not necessarily the case, because you're in your comfort zone now. And so how do you stay motivated, and how do you track projects, and how do you hold yourself accountable, if you don't feel like wearing pants that day? Like, by the way, pro tip, everybody should wear pants, because you should feel like you're at work at least a little bit. So, Will, just for you personally, how do you keep yourself on task? Like, how do you keep yourself motivated? You do fairly well just working on your own, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it. I think the experience working literally when it's two people that form a company, definitely helps you realize that you have to get work done right all the time. And so for me, I'm actually really big on the whole egg timer, tomato timer thing.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I actually have my, like, any given day, I'll have four timers running, like, in the upper right hand corner of my computer. Um, One is usually set to about 6 minutes. One's usually set to about 20 minutes. And then the other two are upcoming events, like the next time I need to, like, break out of the activity that I'm doing. But generally speaking, like, that's how I will actually go through and organize my time. And then in terms of prioritization, like, I'll sit down every night before next day, go through. I use Trello as like a Kanban board, and so I'll actually organize my day out and prioritize things, and I'll have like the amount of time it'll take to do something, and the activity, and then I'll just kind of go through. So that's like day-to-day routine. And then on kind of like a week level, I've got everything planned out in like big time blocks. So I probably block my calendar a lot more aggressively than most executives, and that's because, at least for me, I don't find that context switching is a productive skill for me, and especially working remote, I just find it's a complete productivity killer. So like I can't, if I'm going to do meetings, I'll do meetings for like 3 hour block, but to actually get stuff done, I actually do need like a solid 3 hour block with no meetings, which for some executives is like kind of it's like the umbilical cord getting cut.
Right.
So you have to figure out how to communicate with your team that isn't in a meeting, which I think is, one of those immediately challenging bits, unfortunately or fortunately, for depending on which side of meetings you're on.
Yeah, I found that was especially for me. I guess the closest thing to that I could describe for it happening to me was when at a certain point, you start to get like, hey, if you're lucky enough, I had to caveat this, if you're lucky enough to have your own office space, I've been doing this, like I said, for 8 years. So now I can designate a room in my house that is only my office, and I could fill it with as many monitors and screens as I want. But at a certain point, that became, I swear to God, I think at one point 11. I had 11 screens. Maybe 3 of them I had actual work on them. The other ones with like it's other stuff. YouTube videos of chicken screaming, that kind of thing. But I found, to me, every time I would have to turn my attention to another monitor, and I saw that the edge, the hardware edge of the monitor, whatever I was doing that was super important on the other one is now all of a sudden on the back burner. It's like there was this physical and mental demarcation point, and the more monitors I had, you could literally divide my attention by those. So when I consolidate all of them into one giant widescreen, which I'm enjoying right now, I actually got much more productive because I don't have like that physical separation. I might have a lot of stuff on one screen, but at least it's there. I get the same effect. I have, just off camera, I have a giant whiteboard on a tripod that has different projects that I'm doing both for work and personally. I also have a countdown of how many weeks are left in the year. Like, hey, dummy, how much stuff did you get done? Like, you have 39 weeks left. And also stuff that I accomplished. So it's all those little things. That timer thing is a great tip. I think the app on Mac is called like Pomodoro Timer or something like that.
Yep.
And because also, if you go the other way and you get super productive, you get tunnel vision. You suddenly forget to eat, get up to take a walk, that kind of thing. I got a standing desk, which I never use. Like, it can stand, like I can do this. I can do this. But I never stand up. So yeah, it's just those little things. As far as like, so for me, I know the reason I call this episode Business in a Bag is because being remote, luckily we can do it wherever we are. I can't count how many meetings I've taken in like my truck, or may or may not have taken in a bathroom somewhere at a Starbucks because I forgot that my calendar was going to go off. What's the most inopportune place you've ever had to take a meeting in?
Ooh, oh wow.
That you're willing to admit.
Just went deep. Most inopportune place. So I mean, I think honestly, like the most inconvenient place is always trying to take a call around when you need to clear airport security.
Okay.
Have the mental timer going down of like, well, so I mean, I already told you, like my days are incredibly very organized, right? So like I've got a timer. I know when I need to be going through security, and I'm sure you travel a lot too, Annie. Well, actually, I know you travel a lot, but like those of us that travel probably a little too much, we know exactly how long it takes to get through airport security. And so oh yeah, I've got like 10 minutes before I go through security calls are always the most stressful, because like you're not in a pleasant situation, right? It's loud, you're at the airport, there's tons of people all around you, so there's not a lot of privacy, so you're like trying to find a place to duck out. And then on top of that, you're really in a situation where you got like the doom clock kind of going, and you're like, well, I mean, like I know if I'm there at least 20 minutes before the flight takes off, I'm probably still going to get on the plane. And like you're kind of like watching the security line go up and down. So you're like, I mean, there's like 6 people in the pre-check line. That's going to take me about like
Start
there's
doing
way
math in your head.
there's too many things going on around you, and just like this incredible like insidious stress. So like that to me is the most inopportune place. I think the most annoying place to take calls for me personally, like where I feel the most self-conscious, is actually the back of an Uber. Which again, if you travel too much and you're a Uber or Lyft user, which I'm very guilty of, especially when I'm down in the valley, dude, I mean, I would hate to be the guy in the front seat that has to listen to a conference call about, you know, widgets, man. Like, and I just think that to me, like, it's this weird. I'd feel so much better if there was like a limo and like it had like a piece of glass that went up, so I could at least pretend like there was some privacy. And it's not about my privacy. I think it's more about like I'm imposing an hour-long conference call on this poor soul that's driving me around San Francisco in the traffic. And I feel terrible about those. Like those are the ones that make me feel personally the worst. But
Right.
hopefully that's a question on inopportune. And then I also shared my worst experiences on calls.
I mean, say nothing. I mean, speaking to the CTO for security, say nothing of the security implications of that, because it's the same considerations that we give with, you know, when we're working on our laptops in an airport. Like, do you have a privacy screen? What are you working on? I can't count the number of times I sat next to somebody on an airplane where, you know, I glanced over accidentally, not purposely, but I could see their entire like you know, third quarter fiscal budget and tabs for ongoing negotiations and stuff. Like, you know, so that gets a little bit dicey. So maybe another pro tip is that for those of you that are working remotely, not that you can really leave your houses that much or be or should be in proximity to people that are around you, but you can use this stuff for later too when everything calms down. Getting a privacy screen, making sure that, you know, it's not super sensitive information that you're talking about, like not taking meetings, because so many people do that. I hear it sales guys all the time. Oh no, here's our rate. We got to undercut them by this, and it's X company, and it's exactly this person. Here's their social security number. Like, just having that stuff out in the open like that. So what's in? Actually, this is one of my favorite ones that I do with my friends who travel a lot too. What's in your go bag, right? Like what do you have in your bag where, you know, if something went down, being the executive, if something went down, I could spin up an entire working environment right now.
Yeah. So, and I think my working environment's probably a little different than some folks. So, I'm a big fan of using a cloud desktop for work. A lot of that has to do with like I'm on so many different devices throughout the course of the day, especially if I'm traveling. I'm on a phone, I'm on an iPad, I'm on a laptop. I am like constantly opening and closing my laptop. So like if I'm relying on that to like keep state, I don't want to run out of battery. Like all these different kind of like challenges. So like I'll actually use a VDI instance for core working just because it gives me that flexibility of like, hey, I've got all my desktop versions of everything. When I close my, when I close my connection to it, it's exactly where I left off when I bring it back on. So for me, actually, a lot of the stuff that I need is an internet connection. So I actually carry an LTE hotspot with me. It's one of those big ones that has the battery pack embedded in it, so it can last for like a day of me actually using it, which is great. I carry a laptop. I have tried not carrying a laptop at various occasions. If you want to talk about that, I can talk about what that was like. I carry a 10.5 or 11-inch iPad Pro with an LTE modem in it, which is one of my favorite devices that I have, period. Have a water bottle. And then really like outside of that, I think like a lot of people, I carry, so I use the Eagle Creek bags. So kind
I
of
was
like,
just about to ask you what bag you use.
yep, yeah. So I use, I have a GoRuck GR5, I think is the big kid that I carry around on the back. And then inside of that, I have a bunch of Eagle Creek bags. Other go-tos are the Bose Quiet Comfort noise canceling headphones.
Where mine are laying around here somewhere. I know I have them. Yeah, no, I got this.
those are always in there. Yeah, and then in one of those Eagle Creek bags, I'll have just like meds, which I know you get yourself around the conference circuit as well, Danny. But coughs, colds, sniffles, throat lozenges, because you're suddenly going from talking maybe 3 hours a day to like 12 hours a day. And a lot of people don't realize that throat lozenges proactively are a great way to keep your voice from getting completely shredded. So like as soon as you start to get that throat tickle, like that's for me a pro move that someone shared with me a long time ago. So I have that bag in there. And then I have all my electronics. I keep a phone charger in there, so I keep a separate from the hotspot. I keep a separate portable charger in there, and I have another Eagle Creek bag that's nothing but cables. So that's all the chargers and stuff for all of my different devices. And that's actually this is probably getting more into like travel tips, but that's got everything in it.
Yeah.
So I don't ever take anything out of that when I'm at home, and that's really good for making sure I have what I need when I need it. So yeah, that's kind of that's what's in my go bag.
Yeah, I mean, and yes, this borders on getting into travel tips of people that actually get to go places. But one of the other motivations for me wanting to do this, and why I thought it was such a good idea when the topic got brought up, is because it's all going to get back to some semblance of normal eventually. Kind of like how, I don't know if you ever do this, but sometimes I sit back and be like, if I won the lottery, what would I buy with this stuff? And it's a fun exercise, and it makes me happy to think, how many rubber chickens that scream can I buy with $6 million? And what does that sound like? It's just a fun little thought. Maybe a thought exercise for your next executive meeting. I don't know. Give it a try. But talking about travel tips and when we finally get to travel again, I don't know, gives me a little bit of hope. Maybe gives me a little bit of reason to carry on. So, dual purpose. My bag is a Peak Designs camera bag. Very nice. I am a bag diva when it comes to these things. I have been through so many. I've been through the Go Rucks. I've been through all the tactical ones that all the cool kids wear. Camera bags are the best because they have shelves in them, because cameramen have lenses and shelves and stuff. So on the bottom shelf, I have a portable surge protector. It is a little cube that has 3 regular plugs and 3 USBs on them. This makes you the most popular person in the terminal. When you were sitting there on a delay and you can hook in 6 different people on this thing, it is like you're the Sultan. It is amazing. So I have that. And then I have one of those, you talked about all the wires and stuff, a wire organizer that organizes all that stuff. It's this little pouch that goes in tray 2. And then, yes, the wireless hotspot is absolutely in there. 2 portable power bricks, the Bose headphones, my Switch, if it fits in there, which it normally does because it has pockets and zippers for days. And, laptop. I would love to try to live sans laptop, but like you said, you didn't do very well for you with that.
So it really depends on what the activity is. So like if I go to like Black Hat, I usually won't take it anymore. I think the big thing is being able to really get into documents or email. It's just nearly impossible. And the move to VDI is kind of what like let me feel okay, like kind of letting go of that. Mm-hmm. And so like, I mean, I think you probably know, like I used to work for the government, and where I worked in the government, we didn't have cell phones like ever. Right. It's like one of the weirdest things is like getting comfortable without a cell phone. And like you get to the point where you just leave it at home because you're like, I mean, I'm not going to, do I want it to cook in my car all day? Right.
Right.
And I think that for tech work, laptops are similar, right? I mean, like it's the one place where you can go to pretty much get anything done. It's got all of your things that you need. But I mean, it's challenging to let go of, but once you do, it is incredibly freeing. And I don't know if you've had any back issues related to your bag, but unfortunately, I was actually when I was on the recruiting trip to pull in our mutual friend Stephen Hank into Iceberg. I like got up wrong out of an airport chair, which are, by the way, the worst chairs. So if there's a anti-endorsement that I can do for airport chairs. Terminal, like, don't sit on those. Just stand. It'll be better for your
Yeah.
back. But yeah, man, no. So I've gotten really sensitive to like how much weight I put in there and making sure I take care of me too. And I think that one of the big things, like you kind of talked about it earlier with working remote, I think a lot of people kind of rush to get a dedicated space, which is great. Then they kind of kit it out. But I think that there's something to be said for workplace minimalism. You talked about how you're up to 5 monitors. I actually am down to, I mean, you can see a couple in the background, but I'm actually down to like one that I use primarily, and then I will occasionally switch to a second monitor. I definitely think that there's such a thing as information overload and, just getting distracted, but also like, the most jealous I am of other people's work from home setups is like where it's the one thing just sitting on the table and the table's clean.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing to look at is like, how do you get your peak productivity with minimalism when you're now in your home office? So like you can have anything you want in there, right? It's not like you're at work and you only have like this little cubicle area or like your little desk. You now can have anything. I think that's going to be a big adjustment period for folks. And then I think that probably like the biggest thing that I see as like a major working from home challenge is routines. Like I don't know what yours looks like, Danny, but for me, like I've got a whole 15-minute thing when I sit down at my desk to do work.
Yeah.
Then when I sit down at my desk to like, boot up a video game or something like that, like there's like a solid 15 minutes that I need to like get in the zone, which is a little embarrassing to admit publicly, but at the time, like it's just what works for me. And I think that that's, people drive to the office for 15 minutes. And I mean, that's what I do when I'm not working remote. But, without that time, it's tough to get to the mental place,
Dude,
right?
In the grand scheme of things that people are currently doing, working from home, I'm sure a 15-minute warm-up is the least embarrassing thing people are going to admit to. I do much the same thing, and actually it's relatively new for me. I mentioned my stand-up whiteboard that I've tried the whole Trello thing. I've tried all the different I mean, I still love OneNote, like for long-term things, but like to be organized, sometimes I just have to go back a few steps and go, I'm getting a whiteboard, a physical thing that I can look at all the time. That's not a screen that I can write on. And I sit and I stare at it for like the first 20 minutes of my day, not obsessing per se, but just processing. And sometimes I'm reading it. Sometimes I'm thinking about it. Sometimes I'm finding one little bit of white space and just staring at it. And then I'm like, it's kind of like that scene in like, Gone in 60 Seconds, where they start to go stealing the cars and they put on Lowrider first, and then he goes, let's ride. It's that. It's exactly that. Say nothing. We can have all the organization in the world. We can have all of these tips and tricks and timers and these things, and get those of us with kids, that stuff doesn't matter at a certain point, because they just like to be like, hey, Dad, I am coming in your office fully naked and you're on a conference call. What do you do with that?
My 2-year-old screams, what does he scream? Lose it. And he takes it very literally. Like when he comes into my office to lose something, he's literally coming in to put something into my office, which will then be lost. He doesn't like always, he's like very literal. We're going through a literal phase right now. But no, I mean, I think kids are definitely one of those, like I would put under the category of like danger of work from home. I would say kids are their spouse that doesn't usually work from home. I don't know if your wife usually works from home or not, Danny, but
she had just started like 2 days a week, and now it's full on lockdown.
Yeah. And so when you take that, so a spouse that doesn't usually work from home, and then you add kids in the mix, really the only other thing that we were talking about, and you mentioned it earlier, is like when you're in the zone, getting out of the zone and paying attention to the world around you. I've heard a lot of reports from the peanut gallery of folks that are like, having difficulty separating and getting that work time and home time. That's really interesting to kind of look at how remote work puts that into a really digestible view for people. in the current landscape. Because I mean, it's always something as a as a senior executive, you're talking about like, oh, what's our work from home balance? What's life like here working here? But when you're literally always working from home and you've got a spouse and kids running around, like I feel like that brings a whole nother layer of meaning on top of that, because you need I mean, like I told you, like I need dedicated time blocks, otherwise I don't get anywhere near peak productivity.
Right.
So yeah, man, I'm curious what your experiences have been with that transition, but definitely I'd say those are the three danger areas around work for sure.
So yeah, as much as I fancy myself a veteran work from homer and have all these tips and setups and like I can do it now, I'm fully productive. Man, my son, he's 4.5, apple of my eye that he has been home for 2 weeks straight, and that we're kind of in a routine now. But those first 3 or 4 days, whoa! And I love the lad, and he is funny, and he likes to tell me how funny he is, and then he will come in to the office. God forbid that I did not close the door. Actually, that doesn't even matter because he knows how to open doors now. And he will come in as the day he was born and proceed to just be like, "Daddy, look at my," and I'm like, "Bro." Luckily, it's mostly always on stand-ups with our own team, and our team, like, that's awesome. But I have yet to be on with like Shane or somebody and have that happen. Now, for me, and I know this could take acclimation. Maybe certain people watching this, like, maybe it's not as quite as free flowing as maybe our teams are here, and general security departments and hackers are kind of weird by nature. I like seeing cats coming across my monitors. I like seeing kids barging in. I like, provided there's not some kind of giant domestic dispute happening at that moment and it's just all fun and games, that's awesome. And I've heard tell, I don't know if it's, overblown or whatever, of like, bosses and things and supervisors getting very, antsy about that kind of thing. And you must have perfect quiet and perfect still and blah, blah, blah. Not going to happen, man. Like, I think as soon as people start coming around to the fact of like, we're all in this weird space now, time to relax a little bit. But he's pretty good. Anyway, he's pretty good. My son, it's mostly the animals I have to worry about that barge in. There's been quite a few cat butt, directly, not even like off to the side or peripherally, right here. And I'm just like, man, I'm just gonna let it happen. That's fine. But yeah, and my wife had recently started and just getting used to the fact of being free to not drive every day. And now she has to, like, he's a natural mama's boy, so he'll be down there with her nonstop, and then I have to keep gauge of that to make sure she doesn't go crazy. And it ends up being, it's teamwork, man. As much of teamwork as it is for a company to do this and be cohesive and be productive. Now you have a second team to watch out for, and making sure that, like you had mentioned before, Will, that now you're in your home, and they always say, don't take work home with you. What do you do when your work is at home? And your fun place, your den, is now your office. How do you mentally separate that? Like, so next obvious question for you is, how do you unwind, man? Like, you've been going nonstop for years now between Iceberg and Gigamon and looking after all of us monkeys underneath you. How do you personally, Will, CEO of Iceberg, CTO for security of Gigamon, one of the biggest companies around, how do you just wind down, man? Especially when you got to be in your house, like, and you're not allowed to necessarily go to the movies because nothing's open. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so actually, it's a really good question. I think that it's one that has shifted drastically given the pandemic. Because, like, let's say that you're done with conference calls at 5 and your spouse is commuting home. Like, you get a little bit of, like, I would say, bubble time.
Yeah, a little
around,
buffer zone.
right? Yeah, you get that. Like, you're kind of like, you're not here, but you're not there, right? Even if you're working from home or like you're working remote from like hotel room or something like that, like you'll just get these little spaces where it's like, okay, this is me time. I think the hardest thing in winding down is like actually finding me time. And so it's been, I think it's one of those things where, unfortunately, what that means for me, especially given like we're all in close proximity, my office is now also where like I have to figure out where I'm gonna not, do anything that is to wind down that doesn't involve everyone. And so I think that that's also generated a little animosity around the fact that I have an office at home. Not everybody who's currently working from home from my residence has their own office.
Right.
So I think that's a little more challenging. But no, I mean, I think that all the typical stuff you'd expect from other security folks. I enjoy doing technical work. It's a good way to wind down. I enjoy reading a lot. On the work front, I've actually been going back through Practical Malware Analysis, which is Mike Sicko's book. It's
seminal security book.
One of my favorite, like very well written and a very good book, very useful. So I've been going back through that on the work front. And then on the personal front, I just finished the Expanse series up until where it is. So I mean, I try to do a little bit of reading and have a book on each side, but generally that's it. And unfortunately, just like everything else in my life right now, that's not family. I've got a timer up, so usually try to spend about 20-30 minutes tops on that. Otherwise, I'll either hear like screaming, or my son will start knocking on the door.
Right.
Something like life happens outside of the stay-at-home office.
Yeah.
So I think the other piece is like being a little more flexible about checking in throughout the day and communicating better at home. Also, I think that's one of those things that strangely starts to go out the window as you get to working remote, where you get to just spending all your time in one space with someone. Sometimes communication is one of those things like you really have to think about, like how am I communicating? What am I saying? What am I doing? Because it's really easy when you're in close proximity to just stop communicating. I think similarly, when you're working remote with a team that isn't a remote team for the first time, like it's similar, right? Like you have to think more about like, hey, we used to see each other like getting coffee 5 times a day. Which, Danny, I don't know if you've heard the full story around the coffee machine in the Gigamon Seattle office, the former office, but it's a legendary machine, and dude, a lot of work gets done around that, right? Just kind of like checking in, communicating.
Yeah.
Like right in the middle of the kitchen. It was our very Seattle answer to all those companies that have like a full on like keg in the middle of their office.
Yeah.
It's coffee. Like that's the
and by the way, thank you for that, because when I'm on site, it is I don't even want to go to Starbucks. That coffee machine is amazing. I've gotten so many of my blog ideas sussed out just because I was standing around talking to people around there. So now, while I have not heard exact stories, I've experienced it, and I never thought I would hear myself say that. Like, because when I first started coming to Seattle, it took me a while to get used to it, and now I really miss it. And I miss being on site, not mostly for the team. I love them, but it's for that coffee machine.
Dude, it's one of my favorite things. We actually, Cafe Vita is our coffee supplier of choice, which they're local here up in Seattle. They do a great job.
It's so good.
We go all out with that thing. And I mean, I think it's that, I said like the number 2 measure for remote work is like communication. It's like how well are we communicating? And it's funny being on the leadership side. It's easy to forget that everyone's always communicating. And I recently saw an internal video that involved what I believe is a 4-foot bronze eagle statue in the background. And, I think it's one of those things where, obviously the person in the video is the one talking, so you think you're the one communicating, the only person communicating, and the only thing communicating. But, honestly, when you choose not to do like a stock background, which I, for better or for worse, chose to just out of my office. If you were talking about working from home, it was appropriate. But when you choose to put a 4-foot bronze eagle in the background of your video, like, I mean, that thing is doing some communicating, and like, what is it telling people? Like, no Like, I mean, like, this is like, and it's funny because, like, I think being, having run the show at Iceberg and now being, just on the exec team at Gigamon, like, these are the kinds of things that, like, you start to have to watch out for as
Yeah.
a startup, because, like, doesn't matter when there's 5 people, starts to really matter when there's 50, right? Communications is really, really one of those critical ones. But yeah, I think honestly, to this day, and it was a couple weeks ago, I'm still curious, like, what was the message we were supposed to get from that 4 foot bronze eagle statue? And, like, was it
Freedom.
intentional? Was it not intentional? Like, is this about freedom, vanilla ice cream and apple pie? Like,
I just want to fly. I wish I was a bird.
right, like, this is the most imposing thing I could find in my house, so I put it here to give you, like, a sense of, like, is it gravitas? Is it, I mean, like, honestly,
Establishing dominance.
Danny, I mean, it's,
I got halfway through one of my last meetings with somebody that wasn't on my team, and I forgot that I had to put my virtual Zoom background as a stack of rainbow pancakes. Read into that what you will. I was just really hungry that day, and I got into the meeting, and I think it was with marketing, and I was explaining things. We were going over ideas, and then I was like, "Should I've had pancakes up in my background for the past 30 minutes?" Oops. Could be worse things, I guess.
yeah, I mean, it's, dude, it's when you don't have the coffee machine, when you don't have that watering hole, like, I think that's, one of those big challenges. And then also, like, embracing things like remote, it's interesting because, like, you've seen so many companies, like, just do a hard switch over
Yeah.
remote work. And so, previously when you're working remote or you're working from the, like I said, from a hotel room, right, 'cause you're on the road, you're traveling, it's really hard because, like, a bunch of people are in the room having a conversation, looking at, like, facial expressions, all of that, and you're, like, outside of airport security, you're
Right. Right.
Danny, according to your story, you're in the bathroom at Starbucks, like, but at the same time, like, your voice, like, if you're on the meeting, you should be contributing something, right? And, like, everyone you include in the meeting should be there to do something or provide a perspective or a counterpoint. And I think that, to me, that's just so fascinating, to watch, like, the cut over from, like, screw the remote guys, like, we'll kind of not worry about them, that I've heard of in a lot of large companies. A lot of the remote folks feel isolated or left out. It's feedback I've gotten. I told you we messed up remote work once, so know that very well. Have received that direct feedback, and growing that into, like, hey, like, using, I don't know if you've seen the new Surface
Mhm.
devices, so the full-on VTC ones that have the board integrated with the camera and the screen. Those are incredible. I wish I had one of those in my home office. Um, it's also a giant TV, which,
Yeah.
too shabby. You have the Zoom rooms, right? We have those at work, but you have so many interesting things that enable telepresence and enable these things to be more inclusive. I hope that people who haven't ever worked remote, who are now working remote, take that back with them. Like, I'm hoping that when this all kind of clears, the people that are on the road or remote aren't, kind of back to being, relegated as second class citizens in meetings. Like, the nice thing about everyone being remote is it's kind of democratized the remote meeting. But, I hope we don't go back to a place where, anybody who's not in the room is,
Right. Yeah,
more.
and that's actually like a really great point to end on, because the whole theme of this whole thing, yeah, we can talk about what kind of chairs to get and, like, what kind of space to create and how many monitors you're gonna do, but it really all comes down to that communication. Because I have been in companies and I couldn't really put a finger on it, and actually until you just said I couldn't put a finger on why I didn't like it, is because remote is like, we know we're not there, but we're there for the conversation. But being made to be reminded of you're not there, and therefore second class and nothing, and not somebody to be concerned about. It is a I love my gigs, so I'm not going anywhere. But whenever anybody goes to go find a gig, I always ask, how do you task being remote? How do you stay in communication? What do you use? My team has voluntarily started using our video cameras because we miss seeing each other. No, that's optional. Nobody should be made to put their video camera on, but doing things like that and making people feel included. And if you hadn't before, I hope that they will now, because now we all have to do that. So it's all about communication, and being able to feel included, even if you're, 6,000 miles away. Yeah, it's not going away, anytime soon. But I think as the weeks go on, I hope at least there's lessons learned in this. By the way, for my part, Gigamon does this very well. Iceberg did it incredibly, because it is, as much as it is an acquired skill to be the person working from home, it's an even greater acquired skill to be the person responsible for those people working from home and to make sure that they feel included. And that's a two-way street, man. You can't just be at home and slack off and miss meetings and then, feel like you're not included, because, there's a great degree of personal responsibility there. But I think we do it really well. And I think of all the things we've talked about, I hope it helps whoever is watching this out a little bit. And maybe if nothing else, you're not in it alone. We're all figuring out how to work from coffee tables and dark corners where the kids can't find us, and maybe somewhere that there's not cat hair. Doesn't exist in my house. So, but dude, this was awesome. I like that I'm home now more, that I can do things like this and we can spin this up. I hope you stay as productive. I'm going to gush a little bit and say I was a fan of yours before I ever got here, and I'm an even bigger fan of yours now that I'm here. And I hope that people took something away from this. So Will, dude, thank you so much for carving out time in 7 or 8 of your timers to come and chat with me.
Thanks a lot, Danny. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
All right, man. Talk soon.